we need to create mechanisms so that this can never happen again. So we're talking some reform. We're talking the ability to impeach, the ability for the Canadian public, if they're so unhappy, to have like a 2/3 vote referendum, force the government to dissolve itself. You need to actually put power back into the hands of people so that people feel empowered, because right now we have none. They talk about the checks and balances, but there are no checks and balances for this government. With the way that we have things set up, with a party whip that whips votes, and that people who are supposed to represent us actively vote against our own interests, and they're doing so just to save their own source of income. Like, to me, that's a problem, and we need to solve that. And how we solve that is actually reforming the laws and the way that we're governed in this country. And I think that any kind of governing body should be elected. So the fact that we have a Senate that's unelected, I think that's a problem. I think that the problem with like different committees, like we're seeing with the Human Rights Committee in Ontario, forcing a $5,000 fine on that mayor and then removing the money out of his bank account, that should not happen. Like, these are the kind of things that I'm looking at and going, this is where reform is needed. We need strong leadership that comes with appropriate checks and balances, appropriate ways to remove those individuals if we see fit, and then accountability for this. So there should be no delaying the fall economic report. There should be, like, even if Parliament is completely tied up in the longest filibuster we've ever seen, those documents should still be going out anyway, because that work is still happening behind the scenes by the bureaucrats. The politicians don't have anything to do with that. They just get up there and speak to it. The actual work is still happening and has happened, and it's already been written. So that stuff should be made public. That should be open and accessible to the public. And things like the foreign interference crap, like, that should also be open to the public. I don't think it's a security threat to the Canadian people if we release which individuals have been acting inappropriately with other foreign entities against our own interests. In fact, I think it's a greater security threat to the country that we don't release that information. So these are the kind of things that I think has destroyed people's hope and view of our politicians. I think the Americans have their own set of problems and issues, like super delegates and some states having more electoral college votes than others. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't want to import their problems. We need to fix ours. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the piece that we need to get to. Because I know that it's easy when you look and you say, oh, my neighbor's lawn is, not really well taken care of. I could go over and cut that grass. And it's like, yeah, but your shutters are falling off. So maybe fix your problems first before you're starting to look to others for their solutions.
Absolutely. And I agree with kind of all the points you make there. The one thing I do want to add as well is, in terms of part of reform of our processes, is I would love to see term limits applied as well.
Yes.
I've always seen as a problem in general. Even as young as 13, 14 years old, I was like, I look at the states and like, they got total 8 years as a president. And we get however many that he wants. And yes, naturally over time, we've seen over time that like 9-10 years tends to be the expiry date for a lot of leadership in general that we've seen in Canada. But let's make a hard line of like, I'd be okay with the 8 years as well.
Yeah.
I think there's only a handful, I think maybe 3 or 4 prime ministers who've served 3 full terms. And so I think we can, let's axe that. Let's get down to 8, and so that people can at least have some hope to some degree of, hopefully we don't have to go through this all again. I make the joke that this is definitely hyperbole, but this is the joke I've been making, that we give Trudeau the Hitler treatment. No more Trudeaus ever get to run in politics again. Change your last names if you're a Trudeau. No, just kidding. But like, there is some type of reckoning that needs to happen from this situation in our history. What this man's been allowed to do, how he's wreaked havoc on a lot of people's lives because of those lack of checks and balances, and those things should be looked at and how do we apply them.
Yeah. I've kind of thrown around the thought of like, how do you create merit-based politicians? Like, how do you do that in a way that doesn't undermine the whole idea of democracy, of like anybody can pull up their bootstraps and become a politician? Because I do think that there needs to be certain requirements to hold a file, like to be a foreign affairs minister and have no background in any kind of foreign affairs dealings. Like, that to me is concerning. Or to be, the head of all Canada's like health dealings, to be the health minister. and to not have a background in health. That would be concerning. I know that before we previously had Dr. Jane Philpott, who was a physician. We saw her go the way of the dodo bird because Trudeau was upset with her. And she was not in support of, abolishing integrity in the cabinet, basically.
Imagine that.
So, and that's what I struggle with. I think that there needs to be some more rules around that where like you can become a politician, but to hold a file, you need to have a certain credential to be able to hold that file that makes sense with the alignment of that portfolio. That you don't just cabinet shuffle and then throw the Minister of Immigration into a housing now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you let too many people in. Well, you better start building houses for them now. So,
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Just stupid. And like I said, I think we also need our own version of Doge here in Canada, where we actually do take a hard look at what is necessary and unnecessary about our government and what is the accountability, because I feel like that in itself is what is lacking in this country, and that's what's creating the despair and the disenchantment and disenfranchisement with our political system, is the lack of accountability. It's the lack of checks and balances. And then what do you do when you find something? Because it's been every 2 seconds that the Conservatives, like, Mr. Barrett there getting up there and saying, here's this latest scandal. Yeah. And it's like, to the point where we've noticed that people are exhausted by it. They're fatigued by the amount of scandals. There's been that many. They're like, oh, what's the latest flavor of the day? And to get to that point where like people are just like done hearing about scandals because there's been that many, like there should be a scandal limit. It's like, if you've hit this many scandals, you're out. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like there should be actual like criminal proceedings that happen for these things. Because if you're Joe Blow and you've got Enron company out there and you've defunded all these people of billions of dollars, you're going to jail. Mm-hmm. You're put before the courts and thrown in jail. And the same thing should happen to the political leaders. If they're defunding an entire country and acting against their interests, which is contrary to what they've been put in power for, straight to jail.
Yeah, straight to jail. That was one thing Mario on TikTok, he brought that up, which, this was after the latest list of the amount of firearms that are banned now in Canada. And he discussed how it is more likely that the politician, a part of this government, will actually be involved in breaking the law than an AR-15 taking someone's life in this country now.
Yes.
Like, that's crazy. And he was spot on. Like he's right. And that's a reality check for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, and I think, like I said, people are overwhelmed, overloaded. They don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
Like we need some good news. We need some actual checks and balances put into place. And I think that's where the Conservatives really need to step up and kind of say that that's what they're going to do as well. There's a lot of things in the States that I don't agree with. There's a lot of things that I do. And I think that there's some things that we need to pull into our politics from the States. Term limits, some government accountability, the ability to impeach.
Yeah.
Something totally unrelated, but just personal, because I was looking at my mortgage statement the other day. Make mortgage interest like come off your income tax, please.
Oh yeah.
set fixed, 20-year mortgage limits instead of 5.
Right.
But you know what I mean? Like there's things there that they do that we can totally learn from and we can borrow, and not just them, but also New Zealand, Norway. Definitely don't look at the UK, because the UK is a hot mess right now.
Dude, it's rough over there right now. Gee, I feel bad for anyone living over there at the moment.
Yeah.
I do have friends who are living there currently.
Same.
And it's like not fun.
Yeah. So I do think that there's ways that we can like do that jurisdictional scan, look at what else is out there and say, how can we be better? And I think that if the Conservatives came out and said like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to whip this country back into shape again, because we're bloated and fat. And we need to get back into shape, get lean, get mean, and show that they're ready to compete on the world scene.
Yeah.